Prepare for a really, really, really sad episode of Unpack That Bull. What's going on, guys? My name's Cliff, and this is Unpack That Bull, the show where we take a deep dive into pop culture. So like I said, this is going to be a really sad episode. On this episode, we're going to take a deep dive into some of the most heartbreaking episodes on TV. A lot of times, sitcoms, when they're not truly dramas, are all about being funny. It's when those comedic moments are undercut by heavy, sad moments that we really feel the weight of a show. So today, I'm going to talk about TV shows that, while not all comedies or all sitcoms, all of these moments were really, really sad and really, really heartbreaking. Number 6. Dan Scott killing his brother Keith. One Tree Hill. One Tree Hill was kind of that show about basketball that I almost forgot it was about basketball. Like, we got some cool shots of basketball, but towards the end, after high school, it was kind of like, all right, niggas can't just keep balling because only one person can maybe go to the NBA, which is Nathan, and he doesn't. One Tree Hill is a show set in the fictional town of Tree Hill. It follows the lives of half-brothers Lucas and Nathan Scott. Their father, Dan Scott, was with Lucas's mother until she got pregnant, and then Dan dips to go play ball at college. While there, he gets Nathan's mother pregnant, and I guess that's okay because he starts a family with her. In Dan's place steps his brother Keith. He takes over for that family, and he supports Karen and Lucas. Eventually, he professes his feelings about Karen to her, which she rejects him. He finds another love, but then we find out that Dan paid her to make Keith fall in love with her, and when Keith finds this out, he dips. Keith comes back to town to resume his life with potential wife Karen and his nephew/stepson Lucas. In the episode with Tired Eyes, Tired Minds, Tired Souls, We Slept, Season 3, Episode 16, Lucas is in school with his friends when another one of his friends, named Jimmy, brings a gun to school and begins firing. The kids hide and the school's put on lockdown. Eventually, Keith stops the police from storming the school so that he can get in. There, he finds Lucas and Peyton and he saves them. After Keith tries and fails to talk down the shooter, Jimmy kills himself. Keith's brother Dan shows up and picks up the gun. Keith tells Dan, "I couldn't save Jimmy." And Dan points the gun at Keith. And Keith stands up and looks shocked at his brother. And in a fit of unshown jealous rage, Dan shoots Keith. Because Keith has what Dan wants. Dan wants Karen, and Dan had Karen, and he gave her up. So the fact that Dan would shoot his brother for something that he wants, that he already had, is so tragic and sad.
The whole routine.
Ben's death.
Where do you think we are?
Scrubs. There are so many shows on TV that at one point had balanced sitcom and comedy and drama, and Scrubs was that show. Now, real quick, I want to talk about the fact that NBC had a lineup at one point of Scrubs, Community, Parks and Rec, 30 Rock. NBC was killing it. Scrubs is a show about the new doctors, John J.D. Dorian, his best friend Christopher Turk, and Elliot Reed as they start their new lives at Sacred Heart Hospital. There they meet the harsh chief of medicine, Dr. Bob Kelso. They meet JD's reluctant mentor, Dr. Perry Cox. We get to meet nurse Carlos Espinoza and the deceitful and prankish janitor. Also at the hospital are a wide range of characters, from a religious nurse to an incompetent lawyer, and even a spiteful board member that also happens to be Cox's ex-wife. So in the episode My Screw Up, Season 3, Episode 14, Cox has to go to his son's birthday party at the end of the week. Now he doesn't want to go. Who wants to go to their son's birthday party? But his ex-wife's brother is his best friend, Ben. And Ben's coming in town because Ben's been traveling around the world because he got a little cancer scare, cancer diagnosis, so he wanted to see everything. He comes back and he's got a little camera around his chest, and Cox is happy to see him, but he's also like, "Hey, can you go get a checkup, make sure you're still cool?" And Ben's like, all right, whatever, I'll do it. Later in the episode, JD has a patient that dies, and Cox just loses it and sends JD home. And Ben's like, "Yo, you gotta go easy on JD." So Cox finds JD and he apologizes, and JD accepts in his silly shower shorts. And Cox is so stressed from all this, he spent his entire time at the hospital, like 3 days straight, hospital shit, just stressed. And Ben's there and he's like, yo, you got this thing to go to this thing, and eventually Cox is like, all right, I'll go. So they're going, and Cox is like, why aren't you dressed up? And Ben's like, I'll be dressing. And then he's like, yo, where's your camera at? Like, take a picture. And he turns around and JD's like,
where do you think we are?
And he turns back and Ben's gone. And I was like, oh, where'd he go? Where did he go? Where the? Oh, they did the Figment thing. They did the Fig Newton thing. Goddamn. So it turns out that Ben was the patient that JD lost. And Cox couldn't cope with the loss of his best friend, so he just imagined it as elsewise. In all these situations he was dealing with, like JD losing a patient, or he even talks about how he hates going to parties where the recipient of the party doesn't know what's going on. And at first we're thinking, oh, he's talking about a kid in a kid's birthday party. Because why would you take your kid to Hawaii when they're they're not going to remember that trip? Waste of money. But he's talking about being at a funeral where the person who's dead doesn't know the party's happening. It was a really sad episode, and Cox lets himself be hugged by his friends for the first. He don't even like being touched, and he let him hug him. The look in his face when you see him realize what's happening is shook.
Yes. Pizza delivery
Fry's
for
dog.
Mr. Seymour
Futurama.
Asses?
Speaking of shook, talk about an episode that makes you skip over it every time you rewatch a series. Futurama has some heavy hitters. We could talk about Fry's mom's dream, or we could talk about Fry's brother in the Lucky Clover episode, but what I want to talk about is Fry's dog. Futurama is a sitcom workplace comedy that takes place with Planet Express. It's an interplanetary delivery service full of just the worst types of people. So we have Fry, he's from the past, now he's in the future. He fell into a cryogenic tank, came out in the future. We have Leela, who worked at the cryogenic center, now works with Planet Express. And then we have Bender, who's just a bending unit. The show usually revolves around the three, but sometimes we get plot lines for others like Hermes or Zoidberg or Amy, and the whole group is led by the old man that is Fry's great-great-great-great-grandson, Hubert Farnsworth. So in the episode Jurassic Park Season 5, Episode 2, Fry finds his fossilized dog and he wants to clone him and bring Seymour back. This causes Bender to go into a fit of jealousy, and he throws the fossil into the lava. Realizing how much he's hurt Fry, he goes into the lava to retrieve the dog, but then when they go to clone it, they realize that the dog lived till it was 15. Fry throws the fossil back because Seymour probably found a new owner and forgot all about Fry. In fact, what happened was so much sadder. Seymour didn't forget about Fry. Fry told Seymour to wait for him to come back, and Fry never came back. So Seymour stayed outside the pizza shop for 15 years waiting for Fry, until Seymour died. Nigga, y'all made that shit so sad. I'm supposed to be happy watching TV, and you killed the dog John Wick style, and now I gotta skip an episode when I rewatch this shit. This shit accidentally come on, and I'll be like, what is that? The museum with the Fry? No, switch it, turn it off. I'm not finna cry today. It was a good day. The directors and writers of this episode said they toyed with the idea of making the dog Fry's mom, but then thought that would be too sad. And then they said the same thing with Fry's dad, but again was too sad. Nigga, with the dog, guess what? It was still too sad. Y'all should have did a toy or some shit. Like Toy Story style. Like the toy found a new owner and he got played with and no one was sad. And that's it, right? That would have been fine. That would have been a fine and dandy episode. My lunchbox. Scrubs. Again. Boy, Scrubs be on the list, man. Scrubs have some heavy hitters. Alright, talk about when Nurse Laverne died. That is still a TV death I can't get over. Here, we get the recurring character Jill. Jill is played by Nicole Sullivan, and I really like Nicole Sullivan because she's in a lot of things as like a mom or a stressed out parent where she's like that. She's in Blackish. She's in the show like that was about a dispensary with weed. Like she's in a lot of stuff, and I like her. She had a garage band. Like I don't know why I know a lot about Nicole Sullivan, but I like her as an actress. So she plays Jill Tracy here, and Jill's annoying and she's a hypochondriac. She first appears in My Nickname and she returns several times over the series. So in this episode, My Lunch, Season 5, Episode 20, JD wants to have lunch with Dr. Cox, but he ignores him. JD follows Cox to the grocery store, and there they run into Jill, who complains, but again they ditch her. Later, Jill dies, and it's ruled a drug overdose. JD is upset with himself because he didn't notice Jill was depressed, but she was an organ donor, so 3 patients get her organs. Cox takes JD out to lunch and tells him he's not responsible for Jill's death because she didn't go to the hospital, she went to the grocery store. And then he says this. So we later find out that Jill actually died from rabies, which means that the organs that came from her also have rabies. And then 2 of the patients die, which hits Cox so hard. And JD's like, listen, like, we didn't know she had rabies. It would have been silly to test for rabies because it was such an out there situation. It's not our fault. Those people needed organs. They would have died without Jill. They died with Jill. They would have died without her. And Cox kind of accepts this until they get a page. And the 3rd patient, who's the most closest to Cox, dies. And Cox turns to JD and says this. And Dr. Cox, a usually held together man, is sent spiraling. Will's dad, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. If you didn't cry at this episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you're a goddamn liar. Why don't he want me? The show is basically the theme song. Will got into a fight, so his mom sent him to go live with his cousin and his aunt and his uncle, who are all very rich and live in Bel-Air. She said, go live with the rich, nice people, the white people, which is what she said. That's basically, you could have just said white, but that would be cool too. So Will lives with his uncle Phil and aunt Vivian, and he also lives with his cousins Carlton, Hillary, and Ashley. In this heavy-hitting episode, Papa's Got a Brand New Excuse, Season 4, Episode 24, Will is reunited with his father. So his father, Lou, has not seen Will or his mother for 14 years because he abandoned them. Vivian and Philip simply can't forgive Lou for abandoning Will, but Will seems to have grown attached to Lou. Usually in The Fresh Prince, we see a swagged out Will Smith going around basically just bouncing everywhere, but here he drops that, and he seems more like an eager kid. Subsequently, Will and Phil get into a heated argument over Lou. Will leaves Phil shattered when Will says, Phil agrees, so he tries to take a hands-on approach, and Lou and Will have a trip planned. But before they can leave, Lou leaves. Phil stops him and he gives him this powerful rant. And then Lou actually tries to dip out before Will sees him, and Will sees him and Will knows what's happening. And Will says goodbye to his dad, and he even denounces him by saying, and the writers for the show meant for Will to just brush this off and keep going as normal. But Will Smith took this moment and he delivered a powerful monologue. Like, for that to be off the cusp, you can hear crying at the end, and that's the actress for Hillary. The actor for Lou said that he walked off the set and this nigga was crying. Will said that he walked off and he was crying. Director said that Will had a hat one scene, didn't have a hat in that scene, and was like, you don't reshoot that scene. That's just, you just cut that and go. Like, that's what you do with that. That's a tearjerker right there. So before we get into the most heartbreaking episode on TV, let's talk about some honorable mentions, because not everyone makes a cut, but we still gotta talk about them because they're still powerful. Maybe you guys believe they belong on the list, but honorable mentions.
That was just my crazy friend. She told me I should get off the plane because she had a feeling that there was something wrong with the left phalange.
Okay, that doesn't sound good.
Well, I have to try here in Miami with the people who knew her, who cared about her.
I loved Finn, and he loved me, and he loved all of you guys.
The Red Wedding. Game of Thrones. Come on now. Come on now. The most talked about event in the last millennia of television. Other than Breaking Bad, tell me what the most talked about event was that wasn't the Red Wedding. You can't? You can't name an event where a TV show murked every single character that you love or affected every single character on that show. You can't name it because you can't. I asked you to and you can't respond because it's a video, but you can't. Now I struggle with this because there is another really sad moment on Game of Thrones, and it is Shireen's death. Shireen's entire death scene is the saddest thing I've seen on TV. From her asking her father what she can do to help the war, to her father's soldiers marching her, to her death, to her pleas for her parents, the people that are supposed to love you unconditionally, going unanswered, all the way to hearing her pleas for help change to screams of agony. It is probably the most fucked up thing I've seen on TV. Game of Thrones burned a child alive on TV. So I believe at one point Game of Thrones was one of the best shows on TV. Regardless about how you feel about how it ended, that doesn't take away from the fact that Game of Thrones was one of the best written shows on TV. So Game of Thrones is basically a show about an Iron Throne that is ruled down in the south by one guy. It's like the Baratheons and the Lannisters, and they rule all over the Seven Kingdoms, which includes the spot up north where these guys named the Starks live. It's an old family too. It's like part of the Seven Kingdoms. They used to be their own king. All the kingdoms used to be their own kingdoms, but now they're all rule under the Iron Throne. And the Starks kind of do too, but they're all the way up in north, so they don't care. Like the north is as big as the other 6 realms, right? Eventually, there's also a girl in Essos. She got dragons. They're coming. Eventually, the Baratheons lose power because the king, Robb Baratheon, gets killed by his wife, a Lannister. Ned Stark, ahead of the Starks, goes down south. Whenever a Stark rides south and niggas die, he gets his head cut off. That starts a war between the North and basically the rest of the realm. Leading the war for the Starks in the North is Ned Stark's oldest son, Robb. This nigga like 17, he got a wolf, this shit is magical. He killing it on the battlefield. Really, at first he starts to lose, but once he starts to get knowledge and get speed, he's a natural leader. They do have a tricky part though, where they need to cross a river, and so they ask for this man named Walder Frey's help. And he's like, yeah, sure, I can help you. He's got to marry one of my daughters, and Robb's like, cool. But you know how 17-year-olds do. He saw someone else that he loved, fell in love with her, and he went back to Walder Frey and said, I'm not actually gonna marry her. And Walder was like, I guess that's cool. Your cousin can marry her, but somebody's gotta pay. So he has a wedding, the Red Wedding. So in the episode The Reigns of Castamere, Season 3, Episode 9, Robb's army arrives at the Twins. Robb apologizes to Walder Frey. Sandor is traveling to the Twins with Arya, the youngest Stark that's been separated from her family for about 3 seasons. Edmure, Robb's cousin, marries Rosalind, Walder's daughter, and Walder calls for the wedding ceremony. It's weird you want your daughter to fuck. So everyone's enjoying the party, right? Well, just like weddings, the band fucked up and they played the wrong song. This band starts to play The Reigns of Castamere, which is House Lannister's song. So immediately Robb's mother, Catelyn Stark, is like, something's wrong. Catelyn Stark looks next to her to Lord Bolton, another head of a great northern house, and realizes that this is a trap. Walder Frey orders his men to attack the Stark men. He kills Robb's wife. Not only does he kill Robb's wife, he stabs her in the baby. You stabbed a pregnant girl in the belly. That was her doing that. All terrifying. All terrifying. It's an all-out slaughter. Arya sees Frey men kill Stark soldiers in Robb's direwolf Grey Wind. Sandor comes in and saves her, but she gets this close to being to her family only to see the outskirts of the massacre. Eventually, Rob makes his way to his wife, and she's dead. And he stands up, and Catelyn stands up, and she has Walder Frey's 13-year-old wife, and she's like, I'm gonna slit her throat, just let us leave, walk out of here. Lord Bolton walks up to Rob, and
The Lannisters send their regards.
yeah. I'm getting sad thinking about it. And then Catelyn slits her throat. And then the next episode, they fucking deface this man's corpse by taking Rob's headless body and putting his direwolf's head on his body and parading him around. It's just disrespectful. It's so disrespectful. And I think what differs from this episode than all the other episodes is that I kept watching those. I wanted to be like, all right, now what happens? All right, bet. Now what happens? With this, I was like, fuck y'all niggas. For real, I was like, all right, you killed Ned Stark. I'm still on board, but you have to stop. And I mean, they did stop, but it's sad. And I was gonna say when Jon got stabbed when they did the For the Watch, but really, I binge watched the series, so I knew what was happening. Like, if you binge watch the series and you're like, oh, this main nigga got stabbed at the end of that season. He came back in episode 2. I was like, he took the breath at the end. Niggas sound like Imagine Dragons. But I don't know, guys. Maybe you thought there were some heavy hitters that I missed. Let me know. Put a comment down here and tell me what you thought the most heartbreaking episode of TV was. Thanks for watching, guys. My name's Cliff. And this has been Unpack That Bowl. Peace. Get it? Because we just unpacked the bowl. Peace.